Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to another edition to the Point Podcast. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope you had a great weekend. Got some great weather. Now we got some rain on a Monday, but hey, didn't rain all weekend, so I'll take that. Some really interesting sports stories from this weekend. Going to talk about a lot of different stuff today. Obviously, the NHL. It's draft week. The NFL draft. We're doing a podcast this week with frequent guest Matt Wright as we talk about. We're going to do our own little mock draft. Talk about some of the big players in the draft, potential quarterbacks, potentially 5 quarterbacks going in the top 10 picks, which is going to be unprecedented. Some players to look out for, and among other things. So obviously, the NHL action, UFC 256 over the weekend was incredible. In Jacksonville, a full house for the first time in over a calendar year. It was refreshing, obviously, to hear the crowd. We saw some really crazy injuries, some incredible knockouts, and I think Kamaru Usman really cementing himself as the best fighter in the UFC right now. I don't even think it's that close. Talk about some teams that have really disappointed so far in the NHL this season. Talking about the Montreal Canadiens this weekend, losing a pair to the Calgary Flames. Now they're fighting for the playoffs lives, only 4 points up on the Calgary Flames as we speak. Also, some interesting races in Major League Baseball, the NBA, and a great series over the weekend between the Dodgers and Padres. I talked about last week about how this might be the greatest rivalry in sports right now. It lived up to the billing. Padres take 3 or 4, but they rally from 7-1 down last night in the 7th inning. Fernando Tatis Jr. just having himself an incredible series. So a lot to talk about today. And I thought I'd started off talking about the UFC. And UFC's really had a strong year last year. Obviously, there was no crowd with the pandemic and everything, but they didn't stop. They got it going again in late May, and they did not stop the whole summer. It was some great cards. We saw Conor McGregor fight in the fall, losing to Dustin Poirier. We haven't seen John Jones in a while. We've seen Khabib Nurmagomedov beat Justin Gaethje. So it's been a strong year for UFC. Some really good fighters have emerged, and some really great content. And for UFC 256, live in Jacksonville, the first sold-out crowd in a calendar year. Over 20,000 plus people were in the arena in Jacksonville, and they got a stacked card, 3 title fights, and the main card all had really interesting storylines. The first fight was Jimmy Crute against Anthony Smith. Anthony Smith is a veteran of the UFC who's still trying to win a title at the advanced age of 37. He ultimately got the win after Jimmy Crute broke his foot. He threw a leg kick, went back on his foot. You could tell it bent all the way back. They had to stop the fight in the middle of the second round because he just couldn't put any weight on it. Then there's the next fight between Uriah Hall and Chris Weidman, and this was really hard to watch. Weidman kicks Uriah Hall, and you've seen his leg basically have a contusion in the bottom of it, and it was a big fracture. He had to have emergency surgery that night. He had to be helped off. It was, to be quite honest, I was watching it live. It was one of the more disgusting sports injuries I've ever seen. When I think of some really scary and just kind of disgusting when you think of the way it looks, Paul George in the Olympics when his ankle gave out on him, that was tough to watch. I think of Gordon Hayward in basketball as well. Richard Zednick when he got sliced, that was really hard to watch. Those are just a few. This was right up there. I think Ryan Shazier for the Pittsburgh Steelers when he had to be stretchered off and he was paralyzed. That was hard to watch. But yeah, Weidman. I mean, Uriah Hall. He was kind of beside himself. He just sat in his knees. And one thing about the UFC, it's a very violent sport. Obviously, that's the name of the game. But the respect and the sportsmanship that these fighters show after a fight, I think is better than any other sport. There can be trash talk before, but after every fight story, you see the respect. They give each other props. I'll talk about the main event. who, Jorge Masvidal is one of the biggest trash talkers in sports, but he gives credit where credit is due. And that's one thing I love about the UFC. Yes, it's violent. It's not going to be for everybody, but it's one of the more, it's a growing sport. It's becoming more and more popular. We see sold out shows around the world. They can go to China. They'd sell out there. They can go to Jacksonville. It doesn't matter. They're going to sell out wherever they plan to go. And so that was kind of a tough moment to see Chris Weidman get stretchered off, but nonetheless, that was that fight. That brings us to the 3 title fights. We've seen Valentina Shevchenko. It's a hard name to say. She retains her belt against Jessica Andrade with a second round TKO. So she's one of the more dominant fighters in women's history in the UFC. Her and Amanda Nunes, Ronda Rousey. Those are the big names you hear about. She's just defeated everybody that comes against her. So in her weight division, she's all class. Then we've seen Rose Namajunas regain her belt. The strawweight champion. She defeated Joanna Jędrzejczyk a few years ago, which was Jędrzejczyk's first loss in the UFC. And Namajunas is a striker, and she can finish fights with her legs or her fists. In this case, a first round, not even 45 seconds into the fight, she gets a kick right to the head of Wheelie. She goes down, instant KO, and Namajunas regains her title. She's, again, one of the better women fighters of all time. Just with this win, it propels her into that pantheon of excellent competitors, and she's all class too when it comes to, Thug Rose Namajunas. So she regains her title in kind of an upset. Wheelie had just defeated Joanna Jędrzejczyk in her last fight, which is one of the best fights of 2020. But Thug Rose regains her title and starts a new reign as the strawweight champion. Then that brought us to the main event, where we had Kamaru Usman, who had just fought 70 days prior against Burns and Gilbert Burns, and it was a second round knockout for Usman, but Burns was a tough fight. He in that first round was pretty highly contested, but Usman is a fighter. This guy is built, he's chiseled. He's just getting better and better. He's just one of the best fighters in the world. He's got one loss in his MMA record. He's only got one loss in his career, and he knows how to win. He can win on the ground. He can win striking. He's going up against Jorge Masvidal, who he had beaten earlier in 2020, but it was a win that was contested because Masvidal took the fight on basically 7 days notice. He didn't have a training camp. He showed up. Usman beat him via decision in the 5th round, but neither of them were happy. Usman wanted to prove that he could beat this guy easily, and Masvidal thought, I wasn't ready. Let me come prepared, and I'll beat Kamaru. And the two met. And the first round, it was contested, but Usman, I would say, won the first round. But Masvidal got some good strikes in. Usman was showing his power. But again, even Usman landed a few, but Masvidal looked pretty confident, was not worried about his striking ability. After the first round, it looked like Usman was getting tired. He was breathing heavy, but I think that might have been a ploy more than anything, because in that second round, we see one of the most deadly knockouts that I've seen in a long time. He just straight right hand clocks Masvidal. You see the sweat just fly from Masvidal at the top of his head. It flies across the cage. He hits the floor, and he tries to stay awake. This is the thing about Masvidal. He's a tough son of a bitch. You see him as he hits the ground. He's trying to not fade, but the hit was too much. He passes out. Kamaru Usman retains his welterweight championship again, and he's won 14 fights in a row at welterweight, and he's beaten Colby Covington. He's beaten Masvidal twice. He's beaten Burns. This guy's not afraid of competition. There's a lot of things that guys do to duck potential fighters. I think we see that more often in boxing right now, where Tyson Fury, I think, wants to fight Anthony Joshua, but Joshua is holding up the proceedings. And then, Deontay Wilder and Joshua were going to go. Joshua didn't want to fight him, but Usman takes on all challengers. And to me, this win in the past couple of fights has proved that this guy's more prepared. He's in better shape, and he's just better than anyone in his weight division. And pound for pound, I don't think you can make an argument for anybody other than Kamaru Usman to be the best fighter in the world. Just the way he goes about his business, it's tactical, it's precision, and it doesn't matter who's going to fight. There's him and McGregor were jawing on Twitter. McGregor should just focus on fighting Dustin Poirier, who he'll fight in July. He lost to Poirier last time, and McGregor's just trying to stay relevant right now because it's been a while since he's won an actual fight against somebody that's worthwhile. He beat Cowboys on his last legs. But if I'm Kamaru Usman, he's got nothing to prove against Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor has to do something worthwhile other than just going on Twitter and saying how great he is. Usman does it in the ring. Every time he's in there, he wins. So we'll see. But they're saying the next fight will be Colby Covington against Kamaru. They fought obviously once before. Usman beat him via 5th round TKO. Covington has not fought in a while. So that makes you see how prepared he is and when this fight actually takes place. I'm guessing it's in April, maybe August, September would be the time for this fight. But it'll be interesting to see. Again, these two have a checkered history. Covington's an interesting cat because he's very political. He's been he was very pro-Trump and pro-Trump, but also conspiracy theory, all the way, kind of Fox News-ish, Tucker Carlson kind of guy. So I wouldn't call him the most progressive thinker in the world. And I'm sure fighting an African he'd like to beat him. That's kind of the correlation I'm making here. But fantastic pay-per-view. Again, Usman just continues to prove that he's the best in the world right now. Some interesting stuff, in May, we're going to see Charles Oliveira fight Michael Chandler for the lightweight belt that was vacated by Khabib Nurmagomedov. See Nate Diaz get back in the cage. Tony Ferguson will fight on that card. That's May 15th. That'll be in Houston, Texas. So we'll see another sold-out crowd. In July, they just announced that Israel Adesanya, coming off his loss to Jan Blachowicz, will fight Marvin Vettori for the second time for the title. Davison Figueiredo and Brandon Moreno will get the rematch. They fought in the last pay-per-view of 2020, which I think was the fight of the year. It went 5 rounds. Figueiredo won via decision, but it was one of the more brutal fights in recent memory where both of them had to take a 6-month medical suspension because it was that brutal of a fight. Both of them took so many key haymakers, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing that rematch. So that pay-per-view will be in June, and then July we'll see Poirier McGregor 3, which I can take or leave at this point. It's not a pay-per-view event. I'm gonna buy it because I buy all the events, but it's definitely not. It's not more special or more important than the next two. The next two have title fights. The next two, actually have meaning. Again, if McGregor wins the fight, which he should in July, then whatever, he can put his name back into things. But right now, he's irrelevant. He's a non-factor when it comes to UFC. Yeah, he's got a big mouth and he likes to shoot it off. But in sports, until you win, you're a jag. You're just a guy. I correlate it to Toronto Maple Leafs in the media. Toronto Maple Leafs are a big entity like Conor McGregor, but the Toronto Maple Leafs can have a great regular season or a great training camp for Conor McGregor here and look ripped and look cut and whatever. But until you get into that playoffs, till you get into the cage and do something, then it's all talk, no action. So we'll see what he can do and what subsequently the Toronto Maple Leafs can do down the stretch here. But interesting, great pay-per-view event, and I'll be interested to see what happens down the line. Covington, Usman 2 is likely the next fight, and maybe Usman, if McGregor wins, sure, they can fight 170 pounds, and I wouldn't mind seeing Usman knock out Conor McGregor. So something to look forward to, I guess. over the weekend, some interesting developments. I don't listen to the sound very often in anything. I to be honest, in the last 6 months of watching sports, I may have had the sound on of a game 3 to 4 times, and that's when I'm with other people. That if I'm at my parents' house or I'm with friends, they put the sound on. Obviously, they're not psychotic like me. But I don't like listening to the sound because I don't like people telling me how I should interpret something or what happened. I can make my own conclusions. That's why I don't listen to it. And Saturday night, I did turn on the sound for Saturday headlines in the second intermission of the Calgary, Montreal / Toronto, Winnipeg games on CBC. Of course, all Canadian matchups every damn night. And it was Elliot Friedman talking about the division formats for next season. So this piqued my interest because this year's different. Obviously, they had to do it this way. They had to have the Canadian division, the East, what have you. The Canadian division has been nothing short of a failure. And nobody can convince me otherwise. I looked up ratings. Ratings aren't good. And if you aren't fatigued of seeing like Toronto, Edmonton, Toronto, Montreal on a Saturday night used to have a feeling. Used to be, that's a big game. It's not anymore. You feel nothing. And I'm really looking forward to the playoffs to get out of this monotony and just move on to something. But I'm worried about it because it's the same matchups that we've seen all year. Like the first round, Toronto, Montreal, or Toronto, Calgary, say right now, because Calgary's back in the mix, that doesn't excite me. Winnipeg, Edmonton. Okay. Minnesota, Vegas. See, that would excite me because I watch all the teams, but that series would excite me. But number one, the Canadian division, I was promised that we'd see some rivalries and some passion. Where is it? I've seen Calgary and Edmonton play 6 times. There's nothing there. And it doesn't have to be fighting. Just show that you care. Too often, the Canadian division is the weakest mentally and physically because of how inconsistent these teams are. We see the Toronto Maple Leafs lose back-to-back to Vancouver. And yeah, every team goes through slumps. Well, you got your ass kicked against Vancouver the second time, 6-3. And I don't care how good Holtby was. You lose to Vancouver twice after half their team's sick. And then you go beat Winnipeg twice. How does that make any sense? And then Hellebuck can't stop a beach ball either game. It's like, what the hell is going on with him? You got Vancouver, who's hot, and they lose to Ottawa. And then Ottawa, it's just, I'm happy that this is a 1-year experiment. I don't want it again. Never, ever, ever. It's not just about the Canadian division, but because we live in Canada, it gets shoved down our throat day after day. And it's honestly baffling to me because I listen to different radio shows and different things that they don't talk about American teams and they can just get away with it. Yeah, I get it. Your market's Canada, but there's a lot of good. Guess what? The team that's going to win the cup is likely going to be the American team because they have since 1993. And just because this year a Canadian team's getting to the conference final, because let's be honest, because there's a Canadian division, that's the only reason. Because when has that ever happened? The Jets, Vancouver, the Jets, when they got there, got their ass kicked the one time that they did get there. Montreal got there against the Rangers. But since Vancouver, no team's gotten to a Stanley Cup final since 2011. No Canadian team has won a Stanley Cup since 1993. And just by proxy and by, COVID, a team's getting to the conference final, so now we have to keep talking about these Canadian teams. The Pittsburgh Penguins are in first place in the East standings. Some people wouldn't know that. Sidney Crosby's having a fantastic season. He might be nominated for the Selke Trophy. He might win it. Shouldn't, but he might. We don't even hear that. Like, it's crazy to me. Like, Sidney Crosby, one of the greatest players of all time. You hear nothing from the media. Sidney Crosby. Like, do they have to talk about Alex Galchenyuk for the fourth time? Or how Jake Allen's been a great. I've heard Jake Allen's a great story all year. I've heard Jonathan Drouin can't score. I know. I've heard it since the first week because he hasn't been scoring since then. It's just baffling to me. You know, Washington, Alex Ovechkin's out with an injury. How many people knew that? He played the Islanders Saturday night. Anybody know he was hurt? Didn't play? Probably not. Probably not. I mean, Washington played the Islanders Saturday night. That's a great. They've won 2 in a row against Long Island, the Washington Capitals, without Alex Ovechkin. That's pretty impressive. Not bad, you know? But no. Let's go. Let's lead with Toronto, Winnipeg, and then we'll go to Ottawa. Show highlights of Ottawa, Vancouver before the Pittsburgh game, or Washington, the Islanders. Quote ESPN. Come on, man. Come on. But again, I don't run things, but it's just baffling. The Minnesota Wild are 1 point behind the Colorado Avalanche in the standings. They've won 8 in a row. The Minnesota Wild, who nobody had expectations for, and Dean Evison is going to be nominated for Coach of the Year. But did we know? No. Did we know Joel Eriksson Ek is having a great season? But maybe the silver lining to my rant today is people, all my loyal listeners, will come listen to me to know this. Because the obvious is the Canadian division is great, according to the media. It isn't. They have to blow smoke because that's what media companies do. They're full of shit, all of them. But maybe you come to me because you want to hear about the Minnesota Wild and how they just continue to tear up the NHL right now. And it's not just Kaprizov. I mentioned Joel Eriksson Ek. Their defense, they have one of the more underrated defense scores. You got Matt Dumba, you got Spurgeon, you got Suter back there. It's a pretty solid group. And how about the Dallas Stars? To start the year, they go through COVID hell. And they have this schedule, this game after game after game. They're 2 points out of a playoff spot without Radulov, without Ben Bishop the whole year, without Tyler Seguin the whole year. Yet they get guys that step up. Rookie Jason Robertson, going to be nominated for the Calder Trophy, may win it. Probably not, but maybe. Jamie Benn scores an overtime winner Saturday night. They're right there. Huge game tonight against the Carolina Hurricanes. Huge game. Carolina's first in the Central, Carolina. Now, if I said at the beginning of the year that that the East would be the worst division, if the Canadian division would be the worst division, which it is, people would have said I'm effing crazy. And no, you're a hater and you're full of it, and you're just hating on the Toronto Maple Leafs. No, I'm not. I just watch what I watch. I watch like Saturday afternoon. I watched Colorado St. Louis. Really good game. And I saw will and I saw fight from a guy named Ryan O'Reilly. It was 2-0 Colorado early. He got beat on the second goal. It was his fault. And he was pissed off about it. He yells out, fuck. You could see it on the telecast on NBC. He hits a hat trick, 4 points, wills St. Louis to a win because he wants to make the playoffs. That's what I want to see. That's a winner. But you think of the Central Division, because I realize I'm bouncing around here. Carolina's at the top. Tampa Bay gets a win last night against Columbus in overtime. They haven't looked very strong lately. They're just pulling out wins. Victor Hedman scores 10 seconds in overtime. Columbus doesn't even want to win. John Tortorella is out the door. They're going to go through a rebuild here. But Carolina's in first place. And, you know, they've been building a program for a while. You know, Tom Dundon bought the team. They got Don Waddell as the GM. And obviously, you look at the coach, Rod the Bod Brendamore, where they've been a playoff team every year since he's taken over. They made a conference final. And they're in the driver's seat to win the Central Division. They got games in hand on Florida and on Tampa Bay. We'll see if they do. But really, a couple big things. I think Rob Brendamore, I think he's the favorite to win Coach of the Year right now. I don't see how he isn't the front runner. The way his team is built, you compare it. Minnesota, I think Dean Evison will be nominated because they usually nominate a guy that you don't expect the team to play that well, but they deserve it. I mean, they're right up there with Colorado and Vegas. It's not like they're 10 points behind and it's just a turnaround when you make the playoffs, you give it to that coach. I think he deserves it. Dean Evison it'd be a good nomination. You look at Joel Quenneville. Florida had no expectations to compete with Tampa Bay and Carolina. Quenneville deserves some credit. You have all the cast-offs like Verhaeghe, Frank Vetrano with 17 goals, Mackenzie Weegar having a 4-point night on Saturday. Just Hornquist kind of turning his career around. You know, Q deserves a ton of credit for doing that. And then you could maybe go to a Sheldon Keefe, but again, he's lower on my list because of the division. Your competition is minimal. Vancouver, tire fire all year. You knew Ottawa was going to be bad. Calgary's been a disappointment. Montreal's been a mess since after the first month. And then, yeah, you've competed well against Edmonton and Winnipeg. So kudos. But again, I'm not giving it to Keefe just because he's the coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Some will, I won't. So he's there. But you look at Brendamore and the team and just the structure that they play. Yeah, they have some, but do they have a superstar? To me, they don't. Aho is a really good player. Andrei Svechnikov's a really good player. Jacob Slavin, and this might sound crazy, he's their closest thing to a superstar. And it's not because he's going to get points. It's not because, but as a defenseman, when it comes to just being a defenseman, I'm not talking about Erik Karlsson and putting up 80 points and being the flashy guy, because I think Erik Karlsson ruined the defenseman position because they now have to give the award to the defenseman that puts up 80 points. And yeah, Erik was great offensively for a number of years. When it comes to defensive play and systems and structure, he was terrible. In Ottawa, I don't care where the hell he played. It wasn't pretty to watch. Slavin has 2 goals on the year. I think he might have 11 or 12 points. But the way he plays defensively, how sound he is, he can play 27 minutes a night, just chew up clock. You never hear about it. He'll be on the Olympic team, likely for the States, and play a big role, but he'd never get a Norris vote. But I think he's the leader of that team. You know, you got Stahl as the captain, but Slavin's right there. He's the pulse of that defense core. He's willed, Brett Pesce and Dougie Hamilton to be better players. And just Carolina against, they have really good players, with Svechnikov and Aho. Even Trocheck is a good player. Niederreiter having a bounce back year. And then they have 3 goalies that you could all say are backups. Mrazek came into the league as a backup. Reimer has always been a backup goaltender. And then you got the kid, Alex Nedeljkovic, for Carolina. They got a decision to make who's going to be the starter come playoff time. To me, I'm starting Nedeljkovic. I'm starting the kid. I think he's the future of the organization. He looks like a strong goal. He's been really good all year. But you have decisions. But, it's an interesting position. And me and Craig are going to be doing under review tonight on FDS on Facebook Live this evening. So tune into that. But one thing we're going to talk about is Coach of the Year and things like that. But it's interesting development because Brendamore is a unrestricted free agent after this season, where he does not have a contract. Do I think he wants to leave Carolina? No. He was the captain there. She's got a family. I'm sure they love their life there. You can play golf year round. But he's one of the most, he's does not make big money. He's underpaid when it comes to his production. And I'm sure this Seattle, the new expansion team, would love for Rob Brendamore to come coach their team. I think he's their top candidate. If Brendamore re-signed, I think they would target Rick Tocchet in Arizona. He's doing similar things. If the season ended today, they'd be in the playoffs with a team that's undermanned with limited resources, yet he keeps the team competitive. And then potentially Seattle would target Travis Green. Same thing in Vancouver. They had a great season last year. I don't view this season as a disappointment for Vancouver because I didn't think they make the playoffs anyway. A lot of people were surprised because they had their big season last year in the bubble. I thought it was, you look at their roster. Yeah, I talked about this with Casey to start the year. I told him, don't get your hopes up about Vancouver. They're going to be bad, and they've been bad. So Travis Green has built a really strong program there with players. So just a few names to look out for when it comes to Seattle. After this season, when the playoffs are over, the expansion draft's about 10 days later. So Seattle's going to be picking new players, and we have the NHL draft, and there's a whole nother franchise coming to the NHL, and they still haven't hired a coach. So maybe Tocchet will be their guy because Tocchet, Arizona, at the end of the year, if they can't figure out a contract, he'll be ready. I think they'll want to hire the coach sooner rather than later. If Carolina goes on a deep run, could be tricky because if they go to the cup final or, make a push to the conference final, it's not a lot of time to hire a new coach and him to come in and they talk about what kind of players he's looking for, what kind of team he wants to build. Having a few months to prep that, obviously, I think is a better scenario than having a coach in there for a week and a half and then say, okay, let's jump on a moving train here. So interesting to see what what Seattle will do down the line. I also heard this on the broadcast Saturday night with Toronto, Winnipeg. There's this argument that Toronto's a dirty team. And I was shocked when I heard it. I heard Paul Maurice's comments Friday about how, Joe Thornton is going to be a little lighter in the wallet. And, the Toronto Maple Leafs are not a dirty team. Toronto is a lot of things. Dirty's not one of them. I think Saturday night, it was good. We saw some passion out of Toronto. I thought Toronto played one of their better games of the season Saturday night. Just a team game. I thought, obviously the past couple of nights, Joe Thornton's looked better. I still wouldn't play him in the playoffs. I might be in the minority on that, but that's just me. I'm trying to win games, not sell tickets because you're not selling any right now anyway. So he gets a goal, good for him, whatever. But I thought their game Saturday was pretty complete. They let Ehlers score 45 seconds in, so that was ugly. Some defensive breakdowns there. But Campbell was solid. I thought their defense, Muzzin and Hall actually played a good game. They've had a rough month and change here. They've been burned quite a bit. They don't look settled. They look a little frantic out there. So it's good to see them. I thought Sandin, for having played 3 games in a calendar year, has played pretty well. I don't have full confidence in him yet playing in the playoffs, but Bogosian's out. Somebody's going to have to play. I assume Hutton will get some playing time here. But if it was me, and they want to insert Hutton, Dermott's healthy scratch. You play Hutton with Sandin. They're 8 points up on Winnipeg. They're going to win the division. Experiment. If they load managed Austin Matthews a couple weeks ago, do that again. A couple of games down the stretch here. Play him 4 out of 8. He's going to win the Rocket anyway, so he doesn't have to worry about that. He's going to be nominated for the Hart Trophy. You got those awards locked up. Make sure you're healthy. And if it is load management, you don't want to admit it, whatever. I'll say it for you. And but make sure everybody's healthy. Marner's got to sit out a game, whatever. Obviously, you want to get Foligno incorporated with Matthews and Marner, but Foligno's looked okay. He's not going to be a spark plug. I think he just does his role really well. And I think he's a better alternative than Alex Galchenyuk. Again, Alex Galchenyuk's there. He's playing right now. I don't really get I don't understand what the affinity with Alex Galchenyuk is, especially with the media when it comes to how much they kiss his ass for a guy who does nothing. But I mean, I could have made the NHL with just the production that he gives up. I mean, he just does nothing. But you hear his name every night about how great he is. But I don't know. I guess Bieksa and Rudy can keep talking about him and keep some notoriety on his name. But Winnipeg and Toronto, they're separated by 2 points in their head-to-head matchups. I know it's been talked about how Toronto dominates Winnipeg. That's not necessarily true. Winnipeg was also without Adam Lowry on Saturday night, who's so important to their team, and you can tell they miss him. You miss his presence in the lineup, how effective he is, how he affects games, and they had the best third line in hockey, so that's going to be affected. But is Toronto a dirty team? No. Toronto, you have to be a physical team in order to be a dirty team, and Toronto is just not a physical team. So that's how I correlate it. I don't see them slew footing people. Mitch Marner is not a kind of, you could the body type that he has, you could see him being a quote unquote rat. That's not the way he plays. He'll get into the fight when he needs to, so to speak. I'm not saying drop the gloves, but he's not afraid to mix it up if he has to. But no, I mean, Winnipeg's just being a little soft here, in my opinion. Ehlers and Thornton got into it Saturday night. I thought that was ridiculous when it comes to Joe Thornton after the game going to the media complaining and whining about Ehlers. Thornton was just as complicit, but I found it interesting how they just kept showing the Ehlers slash, but you had Thornton in the first period throw a dirty late check on Ehlers, but that seemed to just go under the radar. But again, where's the broadcast coming from? Oh, I won't name the city, but you can just insert here. But I like to see some passion. And it was good to see a game where the Toronto Maple Leafs, who you play a 56-game season, there's been at least 40 games this year, and I'm not even exaggerating, where the team has not thrown a check. So to see all this uproar about this being a dirty team, it must just be because people are like, holy hell, there was a check in this game. I remember when Jake Muzzin was first traded there, he threw a check on his first game and the crowd applauded. That's how big of a joke it was that this team didn't throw a check. And they were so like, whoa, what happened here? So Winnipeg, stop crying, get over it. Joe Thornton, stop crying, get over it. And hopefully they meet in the playoffs, because I think it'll be an interesting matchup. Hopefully Hyman's healthy, Lowry, everybody's back healthy, and we see both teams at full force, because of all the boring matchups in the Canadian division, that one would be the most compelling to me. Anyway, maybe people want to see Toronto, Edmonton. I sure as hell don't. But it's not all about me, but it kind of is. This is my show, so it's kind of all about me. Major League Baseball. What a series over the weekend between the Padres and Dodgers. And for a number of reasons. Again, these two teams are two of the best teams in baseball. And Dodgers took 2 or 3 against the Padres last weekend. So they play a series in between where Padres lose the Brewers a few times. See the Dodgers get a few more wins. But we come into the series on Thursday, and there's a rivalry already brewing. You're in the same division. You got Trevor Bauer, who's one of the more, I think, compelling people in baseball, but I think he's also one of the more hated people in sports. It's because he goes on Twitter, he speaks his mind, he's got a different thought process, and he's just different. He's not afraid to be himself. Then you have, for the Padres, superstar shortstop Fernando Tatis Jr., who is complete new age. He's not afraid to do a backflip or kind of strut around the bases, or make a key throw, slide into home a little more aggressively maybe than he should. But again, Bauer and Tatis are both, in my opinion, the top 10 most compelling athletes in the world right now, because they're going to give you a sound. They're not afraid to mix it up. They're different, and they don't just give you that vanilla answer that to 95% of the NHL gives you. Baseball, I think every other sport, I think hockey's the most boring when it comes to just compelling people. Like, you want to hear from them. Really think about this. How many hockey players do you want to hear after the game what they have to say? because 95% of the time it's pretty boring. You think of Trevor Bauer. I think of Bryson DeChambeau. You think of Terrell Owens back in the day. This guy you wanted to hear him on the mic. Randy Moss, these characters, Odell Beckham Jr. now. You don't want to hear Tom Brady. Golly gee whiz, Tom Brady. Like you don't want to hear that. I think of, you don't want to hear Bill Belichick. You might want to hear John Gruden because he's going to give you something. I want to hear Mike Tomlin because I think the guy's really interesting. But these two guys are at that pinnacle of just being really compelling athletes. So looking over the series this weekend, Padres take 3 of 4. Interesting because the Padres get a win on a start by Walker Buehler, Clayton Kershaw, and Dustin May last night. And Tatis hits 5 homers in 3 games. He's on a tear. He hit 2 home runs in a game. He hit 2 off Kershaw, which was just incredible. And then Saturday in their loss, he hits one off Trevor Bauer. And he does the strut. And I loved it because he did a strut around the bases. He did the bat flip. And, to Bauer's credit, after the game, he said, I don't have any problem with this. And he said, I think he's good for the game, things of that nature. But then he kind of also whined about him after the fact. But Tatis, he's still learning. He's 22 years old. He has the most errors in baseball this season. So at short, he's not a finished product yet. He's still learning. When it comes to his bat, he's electric, and he's always doing something to keep the game interesting. You think of baseball. Like yesterday, the Blue Jays played the Rays. The Blue Jays won 1-0, but it was a 1-0 game, and it was over 3.5 hours. It's a long game for 1-0 baseball, 3.5 hours. Last night, Padres-Dodgers on Sunday Night Baseball. It was early on. Joe Musgrove was struggling. He only goes 3 innings. And then the Dodgers jump up to a big lead to get the bases loaded a few times. They drive in some runs. It's 7-1 in the 7th inning. And then the Padres rallied. Down 7-1, they win 8-7 in the 11th inning. And the last 3 runs, who came across the plate? Tatis Jr. Hosmer drove him in the 11th. We see Cronenworth drive him in the 9th, and in the 8th, he also gets scored in. So he scores the last 3 runs. The Padres win 3 of 4 in Chavez Ravine. And is this a big deal? Not really, because it's April. It's early on in the season, but I do think it's important in one aspect. The Dodgers are going to win this division. They're a way better team. Mookie Betts has been off to kind of a slow start, but they got the pitching. They got the better team. But you want to feel confident playing a team, and I don't think the Padres fear anyone. You look at the guys like Tatis. I even think of a guy like Blake Snell. This guy's not afraid to go up there and pitch against anybody in baseball. Yu Darvish has been such a consistent pitcher over the last number of years, since really leaving the Dodgers, where they booed him off the field in the World Series. He's had a great career with the Cubs, and he's had a great start to his tenure in San Diego. So they prove that they can beat anybody. They beat Walker Buehler. Tatis homered twice off Clayton Kershaw, one of the best pitchers in the history of baseball. And this rivalry is going to continue to get there, because we see Bauer and Tatis are going at it on Twitter, and they keep going after each other. Tatis, he kind of joked with Bauer that Bauer should be throwing at him because he can't get him out. And I love that. We see Kershaw he was a little pissed off when Tatis hit that second homer off him Friday night, because Tatis gave it the old backflip. He takes a little longer going around the bases when he's against the Dodgers. But it's great. It's just, I love this. Mookie Betts not a really explosive guy when it comes to his personality, but look at a guy like Justin Turner. He's got red hair. He's a fiery guy. He's not afraid to be himself. And he kind of throws out Tatis, and he'll hit a double and kind of mix it up a little bit when he's on the bases. And this rivalry is so good for baseball because it keeps people entertained. But more than anything, it keeps people invested in the sport. Again, yesterday's Blue Jays Rays game, 3.5 hours of 1-0. Last night it was just hit after hit after hit, compelling stuff where Tatis is getting on base, he's walking, he's getting hits, he's staying competitive. And these two teams are in the same division. They're going to play a lot more down the stretch. And the first two series have not disappointed, where you see a ton of entertaining baseball. Fernando Tatis is my favorite player in base. He's just infectious. Again, the old school baseball fans likely would not like Fernando Tatis Jr., where they would be, get off my lawn. This guy's ruining the game. You don't bat flip. You don't pimp your home run. Well, you want people to watch. You want compelling storylines. This is how you do it. You get a kid with a ton of spark, a ton of spunk, and he just goes out there and does it day in, day out. And for a market like San Diego, that's kind of been an afterthought for a long time, to now be back in the middle of it, I like seeing that too. Good warm weather teams going at it. Even the Arizona Diamondbacks. They're the San Francisco Giants, Arizona. San Francisco is only 2 games behind the Dodgers right now. Now, I think they'll tail off, but a strong start to the season for San Diego, where they sweep the Marlins this weekend. And you look at the Diamondbacks, they win 5-0 and 7-0 yesterday. They had a doubleheader yesterday against the Braves. They shut them out twice, where their starting pitchers both go 7 innings of scoreless ball. Madison Bumgarner went 7 inning no-hitter against the Braves. The Braves, who are one of the better teams in baseball, get shut out twice. Just a disaster for them. So the NL West is compelling. You got Dodgers, Padres. If the Giants can stay competitive this season, if their pitching can hold up, we've seen Aaron Sanchez, the former Blue Jay, have a strong start to the year. Logan Webb, who's a pitcher, had a triple yesterday hitting, and then he had a strong performance on the mound. Johnny Cueto has found his game again after a couple seasons of injuries. Kevin Gossman, the former Baltimore Orioles pitcher, has come over and kind of resurrected his career. So the NL West is certainly becoming interesting. I mentioned the Braves, and the NL East is another division where I think it's super tough. The Marlins get swept over the weekend. The Braves shut out twice against Arizona in a doubleheader. Ugly, Brian Snitker can only continue to say stuff like, we need to get better, we need to do this, because it's early. But again, you get shut out twice, and it's against a Diamondbacks team that's not a killer. Madison Bumgarner is on the back 9 of his career. He gets a 7-inning no-hitter yesterday. And I love Mad Bum. I think he's one of the best pitchers in the history of baseball, especially when it comes to the postseason. But that shouldn't be happening. And this division is going to be tight all year, because you got the Nationals, who they look shaky. Patrick Corbin's had a really rough start. He's 0-3 to start the year with an ERA above 12. Steven Strasburg's on the injury list, which is no surprise. Ross has been a great starter. You still have Max Scherzer, who obviously is, a future Hall of Famer, multiple-time Cy Young winner. But, they've lost some bats after the World Series. They're not the team that they used to be, but they'll be competitive. Then you have the Mets. Marcus Stroman, I watched a lot of that game Saturday afternoon. He only went 4 innings. He struggled early. You knew it was going to be a tough start for him. But they got Francisco Lindor. They got a good team with Conforto and Nemo, Brandon Nemo in right field. Then you got, guys like Pete Alonso and JD Davis who can contribute. So they're an improved team. The Braves should be good, but again, they're kind of stuck in the mud right now. Then you have the Philadelphia Phillies that have had another subpar start. Bryce Harper is second in Major League Baseball in home runs with 6, a tie for second. But other than that, yesterday they don't get much going. So it's been a tough start for a lot of teams in this division, and I think it'll be compelling all year. Again, Nationals, I don't have a lot of faith in, but the Mets should be there. The Braves, I think, will turn it around. They play the Blue Jays next weekend with an interleague series. So we'll see what comes of that. But interesting start to the NL East with just inconsistent play, some COVID to start the year. So that's been a block for teams. But you got Cubs Braves tonight, which would be an interesting series, because the Cubs have just been a mess too to start the year, losing a couple times to the Milwaukee Brewers this weekend. They're arch rivals, so we'll see what happens there. The Blue Jays. Blue Jays take 2-3 down at the Tropicana Field in Tampa Bay. I mentioned yesterday's kind of boring game, but one big thing that we've seen from them is their bullpen. It's been fantastic. They have the lowest bullpen ERA in baseball right now. Hyun-Jin Ryu could only go 4 2/3 after he had a glute strain. He left the game, but then you bring in likes of Baraki. You got Rafael Dolis came in. David Phelps, who's been a really good add to their bullpen. So they get strong bullpen play. They only get one run drove in, which is by utility man Santiago Espinal, their third baseman. He gets a bloop base hit. He drives in a run, but that's all they needed. They take 2-3 from the Rays. We've seen Steven Matz and Hyun-Jin Ryu really be their two great starters so far this year. They're still waiting, obviously, on help on that front. They could see George Springer make his debut on Tuesday. That could definitely be a possibility where he plays against the Nationals tomorrow. He has not played as a Blue Jay yet, so they're still waiting to hear if it'll be Tuesday, if they'll push it back a bit. But it sounds like he's right around the corner. Nate Pearson's progressing. But nevertheless, I still think their starting pitching is something that's going to be a problem. Matz has been great. Again, I mentioned Ryu, TJ Zoic's on IL. They've already moved Tanner Roark to the bullpen, so he obviously was not working. Robbie Ray's been solid, but we'll see. The bats have got to heat up before they worry about the pitching right now. Other than Guerrero Jr., Bichette's kind of quiet off a bit. Kevin Biggio's been a mess. They've had Bichette. They've had Guerrero Jr. Rando Grichuk's had a fantastic start to the year, being fifth in Major League Baseball in runs batted in with 16. So he's been great. Marcus Semien has been great hitting bombs, not a great hitter for average, but that's never been his calling card. But they got to hope their bats can come alive here. They got the Nationals this week, 2 games, and they play the Braves 3 over the weekend, and they head out west to Oakland and I believe LA. So they got a couple of tough series coming up to see where they really gauged. We'll probably see some players come back during that stretch. I mentioned George Springer. Nate Pearson may return. Thomas Hatch is also getting closer. He has not pitched this season. So some people coming off injured reserve. Hopefully they can get their bats alive, because this team, was known, their calling card is their offense, and their pitching was supposed to be the real flaw of this team, but it's been the polar opposite so far this year. But they take 2 or 3 in the Trop. They're a game under 500, so they're not in a bad spot early in this year. The Rays are only 11-10. The Red Sox, the surprise team, actually lead. They lead the AL East right now. But it's the last week in April, so we'll see how the season progresses on here. The Yankees are still struggling, but maybe they can turn around. I think the Blue Jays have some more depth and some more options than the Yankees, but it should be a tight race all season. The NBA, interesting what's happening, because this year in the NBA, if you finish in the top 6 in your conference, you'll finish where you slot. So if you finish 6, you're 6, 1, you play. That's how it works. If you finish in 7th and 8th place will play each other. The winner gets the 7th seed. So if you're 8th seed, you beat 7, you're the 7th seed going into the playoffs. 9th seed is going to play the 10th seed. The winner will then play the loser of the 7-8 game in another game. Which I know it sounds confusing, but they're doing this for basically more media money, more playoff games, so to speak. So the loser of 7-8 will play the winner of 9-10. And the winner of that game will get the 8th and final playoff spot and go into the playoffs. Now, this really doesn't matter, because in the NBA, it's so rare that you see an 8th seed pull off an upset. And, likely with the Brooklyn Nets getting the 1st seed in the Eastern Conference and Utah getting the top seed in the West. Again, it's not going to matter again. But, it could be fun. Maybe see an upset in the 7-8 game. The Boston Celtics had won 7-9. Then they lose to Brooklyn a Friday night where it was only Kyrie Irving, no James Harden, no Kevin Durant. But Brooklyn beats them pretty decisively. Then they go into Charlotte yesterday, and Charlotte just threw a barrage of threes on them. PJ Washington was scoring. Miles Bridges, Terry Rozier had 15 assists. Cody Martin was throwing it down. They had guys off the bench producing, and Charlotte got a big win because they're in the 8th seed right now. They're clinging to the playoff lies without LaMelo Ball, without Gordon Hayward. But Boston just can't seem to find it. Tatum had a really bad game, turning the ball over. Jaylen Brown had a strong night. But again, Boston's just missing a key ingredient. And right now they're tied with the Miami Heat for the 6th seed. And if I'm Miami and I'm Boston, I am just killing myself to get that 6th seed because I do not want to go in that play-in round, especially if I'm Boston, because I don't trust them to win a big game. A 1-game play-in, if they're 7, they play, say it is the Charlotte Hornets. Well, Charlotte beat them yesterday. If Charlotte gets hot from 3 one night, then you got Boston, and they have to play perhaps the Wizards. The Wizards, who have won 10 in a row, which is their biggest win streak since 2001. Bradley Beal, Russell Westbrook have caught fire. They got Robin Lopez off the bench producing. So they've caught fire here. It looks like Washington will be that team to get that 10th spot to get into the play-in round, likely play Indiana. If I'm Boston, I don't like the idea of playing Washington because Bradley Beal can go off and score 50. And then you got to hope Jason Tatum has it that night, because when he's great, he's great. But when there's no real average for Jason Tatum. I just find he's a great player or he's a detriment. Like I say, turns the ball over 5 times. It doesn't really do anything well for your team. And it kills him and it kills your team because he just doesn't add anything to the table. So definitely something to look out for the Boston Celtics losing yesterday. The Los Angeles Lakers, they got Anthony Davis back in the lineup. They've lost the pair with him in the lineup. He played better on Saturday, but they lose to the Mavericks. So the Mavericks are starting to climb. They're now in the 6th spot. They in the Eastern Conference. In the Western Conference, they passed the Portland Trailblazers, who've been sliding. Damian Lillard's been out with injury. They lose again last night to Memphis, who's in the 8th seed. But apparently LeBron James is going to miss a few more weeks, and it's concerning because if the Mavericks can catch hot again, the Lakers, you don't want to be in that play-in round. Do I think they'll win with LeBron and Anthony Davis? Sure. But having those extra games, just the wear and tear more than anything, I wouldn't want to do it. Having that pressure early on in the playoffs, you take your chances with the 6th seed, go up against, that would be interesting if it was Clippers, Lakers in the first round. That would be compelling, but who knows? But I just look at that situation and say, getting ugly. Obviously, Brooklyn's had injuries all year where James Harden, Kevin Durant, and Kyrie Irving have only played 10 games together when all 3 of them have been on the floor together. But it just works. Again, Kevin Durant, he's been injured, returned yesterday against the Phoenix Suns, one of the better teams in the NBA, comes off the bench, drops 26. Kyrie Irving almost dropped 40, and they beat the Phoenix Suns without some key players, obviously without James Harden. And it just proved to me why Brooklyn is the favorite to make it to the NBA Finals out of the East. Philly's kind of been on a slide lately. They've lost 4 in a row. They got crushed by Milwaukee on Saturday without Embiid and Simmons, losing by 40. But they do have playoff experience. They do have that wear and tear, losing to the likes of the Toronto Raptors when Kawhi Leonard hit that famous shot. But I think you look at Brooklyn, you got guys who are hungry. Blake Griffin looks like a different player. He's playing some really high-level basketball off the bench. DeAndre Jordan, he cares. You got Kyrie Irving. When he's engaged, he's one of the best players in the NBA. Kevin Durant, I think, is the best player in the NBA. He can just score. He can give you 30 in 10 minutes if you really need it. So the play-in round for the NBA slated to start May 17th. You got the NHL season, which is as of right now, if there's no COVID, will end May 16th. That's the last scheduled game. Playoffs to begin soonly thereafter. So we're coming down in the last couple of weeks here. Major League Baseball is in full force. But again, you're going to have end of April here. You got in May, you're going to have the playoffs. You're going to have the French Open in tennis. You're going to have the PGA Championship in golf. This weekend was the Zurich championships in New Orleans. To be honest, I didn't watch much of it. It's a team tournament where you have two guys playing just shot for shot, and I don't love that. I like to see, play a real tournament and then I'll watch it. But so I wasn't really engaged with that. I know Mark Leishman and Cam Smith eventually won it, but good for them. But that's not exactly my cup of tea. But you got the Byron Nelson coming up, and you got the Valspar this weekend in Florida. So golf will be back with lots to talk about as well. So as we close in on May, we get the draft this week, like I said, which I'm so excited for. It's one of my favorite events to talk about of the year. I think I'm going to be podcasting with Matt Wright either tomorrow. It's either going to be tomorrow or Wednesday. So keep your eyes open for that. And starting tomorrow night, Seamus and myself, obviously we've been talking about sports for a few weeks, but we do have a new show. We're going to be talking about Breaking Bad. And I'm super excited that we're going to be doing Breaking Bad. We're going to do the whole series. After each season, we'll likely do a sports podcast or something in the middle to break it up. But I consider Breaking Bad the greatest show in the history of television. Right up there with The Sopranos, with The Wire, with Seinfeld. But I just think Breaking Bad, Vince Gilligan, the writing, the character development, I haven't seen a better show. And I'm stoked to be talking about it with Seamus. So we're going to get into that tomorrow night, recapping episode 1 and 2 of Breaking Bad. It's on Netflix. So if you haven't seen the show, watch the episodes and tag along with us. It's a lot of fun, super compelling, and you'll never get bored watching Breaking Bad. So that's going to be it for Monday. I hope you guys are all doing well. Join me and Craig Eulis tonight on Facebook live around 7:30, 8 o'clock. We'll be talking about the awards. We're going to be predicting the awards, Coach of the Year, Vezina, a whole bunch of different things. So tune into that, and it should be a lot of fun tonight. But enjoy the games, stay healthy, stay safe, and we'll talk soon.